you have to be able to fail. You have to experiment. You have to try, and you have to tweak things. Where we tend to get it wrong, and this includes me, I do it all the time, is sometimes I do it too big. And, I try to eat the elephant.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast.
Welcome, everyone. I am Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, and joined today by my guest, John Kerkhoff. John is what might one call a Renaissance man. He's retired Army and currently a project manager. John, why don't you give your bio and introduce yourself to our audience?
So, hey, everyone, John Kerkhoff. I'm also the owner and founder of Frago 22. I do a lot of project management work for the Army as well, updating their network and voice systems. And it's 20 years Army, retired as first sergeant, and decided that it was time to go into bigger, better things. And here's where I'm at now.
All right. Thank you for that. So we'll jump right in. I know you do a lot of work with leadership and talk about leadership. So what would you say, as we're both prior Army, what would you say is the biggest misconception civilians have about military leadership? And then we'll follow that up with relating it to project management.
So definitely that all military leaders are very rigid, are very by the book, are very black and white. And I think that's a false misconception out there.
Wait, we're not?
Absolutely not. maybe some Marines are, I don't know, but we're not all of us are.
So how, you spent a lot of time in the military and then you moved into corporate America. How did you work on dispelling that myth and that branding, I guess, coming from the military?
So actually, I guess the simplest way to put it is I had to deconstruct myself and reconstruct myself the same way kind of boot camp does, basic training does, except now it's pulling out one vocabulary and replacing it with corporate vocabulary. Rules, regulations, all those things still apply, but now they're just called different things. We're no longer calling them SOPs and field manuals. It's, now you do have your operating procedures, but you also have your business models and different things that you're working from. So it's just kind of deconstructing and reconstructing that.
And how would you say that played into becoming working in project management and becoming a project manager? Because project management in the military is radically different than it is in the civilian world.
It is 100% agreed. It is. However, there is a very strong similarity that corporate America and at least the NCO Corps in the military has, and that is people, time, money, right? If you manage those things, that's the essentials of, the bare essentials of a project manager right there. Do you manage people? Do you manage time? And are you able to manage, a project? So whether that's going to the range, whether that's taking your guys out to the field, you name it, running a kitchen operations, doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing still involves three things. And at the PM level, it's the same thing. So yes, dramatically different worlds with dramatically different expectations. However, you're still running those three necessities no matter where you go.
So it was just a change of the iron triangle rather than a change of methodology.
Yes, but like I said earlier, you had to deconstruct it and reconstruct it to make it make sense.
Yeah, there's not really anything easy in the military, is there?
Absolutely not. Because if it were easy, it wouldn't be the military.
Or the government.
Or the government. Fair enough.
So, you moved up in rank to a fairly senior leadership role. And what are some of the principles of military planning and execution that you believe are applicable both in the civilian, that you learned in the military to apply in the civilian world?
So definitely, first and foremost, I always say taking care of people. Whether they're your people, whether they're just people on the job, does not matter. You need to take care of people first. If you don't, you're lost. You're lost just as a person at that point, because people are priority. So you kind of taking that, that was really dug into me in the military. And, it was one of those things I held true. So I always put my people first, above the mission, above anything else, because they're the ones who are going to make it happen anyway. So definitely taking that from military into the civilian sector was pretty much the bread and butter, I guess you could say.
So, are there any other kind of lessons learned from the military that you apply besides the people first?
Well, I mean, there's a few, but really that's the big one. And then just doing things ethically, doing things morally, legally, right? Not skirting that gray area, making sure everyone understands their kind of role, their kind of responsibility, and how they contribute to the overall success of whatever project we're on, whatever we're doing, building, developing, making. There's just everyone has a place in making sure that they understand how their contribution, leads to that success.
Following the Army values.
uh, Sometimes.
So, I know you've got some very strong beliefs with management and leadership. Care to share some of those?
Well, do you want me to start with the good things or the bad things? Because they're wildly different.
Well, we can start. I'll tell you what, we can start wherever you want, and then we'll circle back to the other one.
All right, fair enough. Well,
Bringing in that corporate lingo.
We'll circle back and we'll pin that up on the board or the
Put a pin
parking
in
lot. Yeah. But one thing that, military or not, one thing that really, I guess, gets under my skin when it comes to leadership is a detached leadership that, not necessarily that they're not giving guidance, but that they don't understand the day-to-day processes. If you're a leader in an organization, military or not, you should understand the day-to-day processes that make your organization run. And you should also understand the capabilities of the people or equipment or skill sets that are within that organization. I mean, that's my biggest qualm with the corporate sector is you have a lot of these leaders who are really high advanced, and they got there through merit, right? So we don't want to downplay that, but they don't understand the holistic way an organization operates. And what you tend to see, at least I tend to see with what I do, is Trevor's out there doing a great job in sales, and he's been crushing it and meeting his goals and his KPIs. Well, guess what we're going to do? Trevor's now in charge of the sales department because he's crushed it. But Trevor has not been taught how to lead anyone and manage that department. He was set up for failure. And so then what turns around is you, through no ill will to anyone, you've created a toxic environment. Because Trevor's either going to go with what he knows, and he's going to revert back to that sales role, and because he was really good at it, and that's what he knows. He knows how to operate that, but only his way. Or he's going to take a mirror of leadership that he's had before previously, whether they're in any organization, and he tries to mirror that. And without the context behind it, without the why behind it, or the understanding of why certain decisions are made and we do things the way we do, you create a problem in these organizations. And if that continues up the ladder higher and higher, that thing falls apart. Or when you usually get to higher executive levels, you tend to see more of people, outside talent brought into the organization, trying to bring fresh blood in. And that's not bad in and of itself. But when that's the only answer, no one promotes from within. Now you have people who are running this organization who don't really understand how the organization runs. And that's my biggest qualm with it. And I speak out a lot about that on my LinkedIn and on my social medias.
Okay, so what's the positive?
The positive is that you actually have a lot of good support out there within the civilian sector. Now, trying to use some of that may it's a organization case by case dependent, but there are a lot of good support systems. A lot of organizations I see now are investing into their people. They're trying to give them those courses, or at least give them that leeway to take different, whether it's leadership courses, whether it's accelerate their career skill courses, in the tech field, those extra certs, those CompTIA certs, those kind of programming certs, project management certs. I've seen that coming up a lot now. So it's there. And I definitely applaud organizations who are investing into their people that way. In lieu of just trying to post that next job offer and try to bring someone else in to try to fill the void.
So, you're passionate about training leaders and building leaders. What are some of the skills or characteristics that you found that create a good leader?
Definitely a person who's really open minded, and not in the same regards of like they just look at everything, listen, and absorb. That is a strong quality, but they're open minded to understand that they don't know everything and that there are some people in that organization who are dead set in their ways and being able to work those personalities. And you have others who are aspiring to advance and excel and show what they're worth and capable of. And then there are just some who are really happy where they're at. And it's being able to manage those different personality types and archetypes and understanding what people are doing, um, that really just crush it. And that's one of the focuses I love to see leaders come in with that open mindset and they start understanding the dynamics of their people, of the organization, and how they all interplay.
So sometimes the most powerful leader is the one that knows that they don't need to be the CEO or the VP, and a middle management role is the perfect place for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how do you, looking at leaders, and we use that term very loosely in our society, I think,
Hmm.
because a leader could be somebody who, like my kids say, I'm leading because I'm in front versus I'm leading because I'm building the plan and I'm executing, or I'm building the plan and I'm making sure that everyone else knows how to execute.
Hmm. Yeah.
And how do you look around and kind of, for the PMs that are listening, especially, how do you think about going from that leap, that proverbial leap from project manager to leader, when that's what every PM says is, I hit the glass ceiling when I become a PM, because you're, you've got two career tracks. You can be a PMO director, which there's a finite number of and not many,
Hmm.
or you stay a PM and technically you're considered an individual contributor and an indirect leader, but you're not in a leadership role, so to speak.
Well, I think we actually have to get back to the basics that there's a difference between a leader and a manager, and both are
Hmm.
needed, both have a time and a place. And if you are a PM, regardless of industry, and you're dead set on only being a leader, you're missing the core function of why you're a project manager to begin with, right? We have to manage those day-to-day operations. We have to manage the budgets and time. It's great to have aspiring dreams and bigger visions, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the PM realm. But you also have to understand when you need to draw yourself back and keep to the basics and keep to the organization, and then sprinkle in your growth and sprinkle in those bigger picture ideas into it. So being able to balance that is really what it's about. And if anyone says that once you're a PM, you're stuck in a PM role and that's your glass ceiling, that's absolutely not true. Yes, there are a limited number of PMO roles, but there's also growth and scaling within many, many industries, construction, IT, game development, film industry, entertainment, right? All of them do not have glass ceilings. They have room to grow and they're looking for that next thing anyway. And it will take a strong PM to eventually become that visionary that leads it and builds it.
So how do you, I guess I would say, how do you build that skill set from being a successful PM to being a successful leader and not successful manager?
So I'm going to say something very controversial out there. You have to be able to fail. You have to experiment. You have to try, and you have to tweak things. Um, where we tend to get it wrong, and this includes me, I do it all the time, is sometimes I do it too big. And, I try to eat the elephant in one huge gulp instead of little bites at a time. But if you allow yourself to tweak things and experiment and run the capabilities of your team, then you're on the right path and you're going to start learning those lessons and you're going to figure it out. If you have a really strong team that you manage and you manage your projects very well, you actually have that leeway built in and you can start giving your team that autonomy, which is going to then open up your bandwidth to do those broader vision things.
Yeah, I like what you said there about the failing part, because I actually made a post about that a little while ago about, for years I was saying it's only a failure if you never learn anything from it. And then I was going through some personal stuff and I kind of realized, I was like, sometimes failing is just failing. There's no hidden message. There's no fortune cookie for it or anything else. It just sucks.
Mm. That's like
You
basic
know,
training.
yeah, amongst other things. But the idea though, I like that you touched on that, because the idea of thinking about, as PMs, we're supposed to be the ones that have it all together. We're cool, we're calm, we're collected. We have all the answers. And I've seen too many PMs kind of, their brains just break when they're asked something that they don't know, because they don't know how to say, I don't know, let me check with the developer, or I don't know, let me check with whoever, or I don't know, and I don't even know who to go ask.
Exactly. And that's that puts you, the individual, in a dangerous spot when you're there and you can't admit something you don't know, or you're not as deeply rooted in knowledge in that aspect. And you as a PM, you're probably not going to be more times than not, especially if you're in like IT and software. There's no way I'm at the level of what my engineers do. And there's plenty of times I'm going to have to defer, be like, hey, like, I have an idea, but let me converse with my engineer first before I give you bad information. And that's okay.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
And sometimes it gets even worse when you try and figure out your way through the answer, and you use terms interchangeably that aren't interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you go back to your engineer and you say, did I say that right? And they look at you like, you just committed us to, you don't even realize what you just said.
Be like, yeah, you just
And then you've
promised
got,
them Amazon Web Services, and we're not anywhere near that.
yeah, you promised them all kinds of, you promised them that we're going to deliver this when you meant to say that. And this is 6 months from now, not tomorrow.
Yep. And it happens. Yeah, especially if you're
It does.
when you outshoot your role and your knowledge, right? And then there's just gonna be days you have bad days where, you have that brain fog. And that happens. So it's nothing wrong with deferring to, hey, let me get my SME on this. Let me get you someone who's deep into that portion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would argue that in some cases that true leadership is admitting you don't know something,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
because, I try to keep the military aspect of my life off the show, but I think it relates perfectly to this example of promotion boards. For the audience that doesn't know, when you're in the military up to a certain rank, you walk into a room with a bunch of higher ranking people, and then they just do a shooting gallery of some of the most obscure trivia you could possibly be expected to know. And the best piece of advice I was given before I went to mine was, if they ask you a question, don't BS the answer. Just say, I don't know, and I'll find out.
Yep. I I'm glad you said that, because all my promotion boards, my supervisor dug it into me. He's like, listen, you're not going to know everything, and it's going to come at you real fast and heavy. The real knowledge is knowing where to find the answer. And so actually my E5 sergeant board, a lot of the questions I had to say, hey, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know I can find it in TM so and so or FM blah blah blah. And really the board looked at me and was like, okay, that's acceptable. And
Yeah.
passed.
Because with all the technology and all the advancements now, you know, I made a post about this, about we run the joke, because I know you're probably about my age, to remember back when your teacher in grade school would tell you, you need to learn how to do math because you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket for when you grow up.
Yep.
Little did she know the joke's on them, but I find myself reaching for my calculator to do simple math, like, hey, this is 10% off. Oh, let me grab my phone and look at it, instead of just thinking, oh, I can take an extra 5 seconds and do it in my head.
Efficiency's that great killer of basic skills sometimes.
Well, I wouldn't even argue it's efficiency. I'd argue that it's just dependency. It's that instinct of this. the square or the rectangle in my pocket can give me all my answers easier than me having to put a little bit of brain thought into it to figure it out.
But isn't that kind of how corporate America has really structured itself? Do more with less. I mean, the military we did, but that's just because we didn't have stuff. But in corporate America, it's as every great new thing comes around, now business wants you to do more with it in less time because it's faster computing power. And in fact, if you want a neat commercial, go to the early 90s when Microsoft Excel was becoming the big thing in business. And essentially the format of the commercial goes, it's in New York, they're going up in the tower to pitch this finance idea to their boss, and the guy literally pulls up this old laptop and he makes this Excel spreadsheet real quick in the elevator ride going up the 52 floors and blows his boss away. And it's just kind of how business operates. So yes, it's a crutch, we should know how to do that stuff, but at the same time, efficiency matters and schedules matter.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also I think that there's a lost art, a little bit of thinking in some cases because, you know, I was building some spreadsheets for prep for this show, for scheduling and stuff, and I was messing with conditional formatting and thinking about the mess that can be conditional formatting. I
Yeah.
had to search. I knew what I wanted. I knew the formula, but I had to search. Sometimes I would find myself searching what is the formula for today, changing the date, rather than that's something that I probably should have known for years, but I haven't used it. So thinking about the muscle that atrophies, sometimes we use things and then we forget, like,
Those
the
perishable
age old
skills.
saying, I've forgotten more than you know, not, not directing that at you, but just thinking about that. Like
It's legit.
when you talk about stuff, it's like, we forget so many things because I'd like to say that it's kind of like a hard drive. There's only so much space on your hard drive sometimes that you overwrite things, but other things you just don't spend enough time to possibly sit down and think about to remember it. It's just easier to hit the search button and find it given to you rather than remembering how to do it. And then you don't have to search for it 5 times in a day because you retaught yourself how to do it.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. I try to look at it more as a balance, right? The trade-off of efficiency and the trade-off of skill. And yes, I find myself a lot. There's some basic stuff that I should be able to just off the top of my head. Then I'm like, hang on. And there's other things that, I could be really efficient at a quick Google search or looking up resourcing something and just be, all right, boom, here, I got it done out of the way, onward to the next task.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up an interesting point too, thinking about task focused as a PM. What are your thoughts on that?
Time and place. I like tasks when I could see the bigger result impact. And it's kind of project for me specifically. It's kind of project by project dependent because there are certain things that in the like the engineering side of it or the IT side of it, I want to push out an MVP, a minimum viable product. So kind of following that Scrum or Agile framework, kind of just pushing what can I get to the customer now and fix the other stuff later. So at least gives them something, at least gets them going with something basic, and then we add and we add and we add. So I like doing that, but other things like the stuff I do with the Army and contracting out there, I have to stay task driven, whether they're bottlenecks, whether they're Army requirements. There are certain things that I have to go in a very sequential order or I'm going to botch the whole project. So I guess long story short is kind of really depends on your project and what you're working on.
You got to work those lags and leads out.
Yep, absolutely. And you got to build your buffer.
Yeah. That's I think the lag and lead is an underappreciated skill set because, we talk about schedules and plans and everything else all day long, but I don't really hear a lot of people mentioning about their leads and their lags. I hear about dependencies, but not that.
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of glad you brought that up. There was a discussion I had the other day with another PM, and we were going through a Gantt chart. And one thing I noticed was that all of his startings were sequential. And I made the very simple question. I was like, hey, I kind of noticed that you have these tasks and then it's this task starts at the end of this task. You don't have the leeway to start that task in the middle of the other task. And he was like, I could do that. I was like, well, yeah, if you're able and capable, not everything has to be start this, finish this, then go to there. Some things are, right? There you have
Mhm.
dependencies like that, but other things it's you could do multiple things in succession as long as the project allows. And his mind was blown, but in a good way because now he was able to reel back in 3 months of his project because he didn't have to push so many things out.
Because he didn't think of he thought of everything as what is it, finish to start? Yeah. I mean, and we as you're a PMP, correct? I can't
Correct.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we as PMPs, we spend all this time mocking the PMBOK, but really it has a ton of value in it if you read it. I guess I'll say with a grain of salt with it, that it's the Bible for project managers, but it's not a Bible.
Yes, absolutely. I will give the PMBOK credit for one thing is that it gives you a solid base. Um, but you can't take it as that's the way in terms of like this is the only way, it's black and white, because it's in the reality of life is you just can't. It's not everything works that smoothly.
This is not the way.
This is not the way. This is not the way.
So so while we're on that topic, I mean, thinking about the PMBOK and the evolution of it, like I took my PMP on version 6.
So did I.
Yeah. So you remember the 49 process chart, and
Yep.
I was able, before I took the exam for the 4th time, I was able to write that out from memory on a blank sheet of paper.
Nice. I don't think I ever made it that far, but it didn't hinder me too much.
Yeah. Well, that was my strategy for passing. Was I realized that was the driver of everything. So if I could see on a if I could see where I was in the question, because the question always gave 70% of the questions gave you either where you were and and asked you what comes next, or would you just finish and what comes next. If I could see it on the map to know, that helped me immensely with figuring out how to pass that exam.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, just thinking about it and the evolution of it and moving away from waterfall to agile, do you think that, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm still kind of mixed about it. Just because I do kind of appreciate the agile. Um, but I've also done Scrum. I'm a Scrum master, so seeing Scrum in
Hmm.
action, I appreciate that as well. I don't know what's for me though. Like I really kind of tend to stick with the basics just because the basics have never let me down. I probably could be more efficient, like really digging into agile or Scrum and utilizing to the full skill set. But at the same time, I don't feel I need to, and I feel it could hinder me. In certain scenarios. Like Scrum, I do love Scrum when I'm talking on my more technical side of things. It's easier, like I said, talked about earlier, that minimum viable product. What can I get to the customer's hand now, and then build and develop instead of trying to hand them that perfect solution right off the bat. But other things, it's I don't want them to see the mess. And have a basic thing if I need to deliver a big system. So I guess I'm still torn on it, but I do like it. I lean more on the liking side. Plus, I do like new things sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you want to, we talked about rigid structures and stuff. Talk to the
Yeah,
Scrum people.
absolutely.
And that's nothing negative on Scrum people. That's just, Scrum is a 20-page guide, and if it's the letter of the law, it is
Yep.
in or out, no deviations, no.
Nope. Don't let that backlog slip at all, though.
Well, don't miss any of the ceremonies, don't miss any of that.
Don't miss it. Dundies.
Yeah, I've worked in some Scrum projects, and the ending and the beginning of the projects was mind-numbing in some ways, because you'd spend 2 hours in a sprint prep
Yeah, the
meeting,
sprint.
And by the end of the meeting, you're just like, I just want to go beat my head against a wall. Not because it was a terrible meeting, not because we didn't get a lot accomplished, but just sitting in a room for 2 hours and then arguing over story points.
Yep. Like if I wanted this, I go back to the military and go back to a command and staff meeting.
Yeah, except in the scrum meetings though, you can usually just get up at your will and leave if you wanted to.
That's true. And I wouldn't have to hear someone yell about you use Calibri font.
Yeah, that's where you get to express your own creativity.
Exactly.
You use Times New Roman.
Yeah. We use Arial 12 here, okay?
Yeah, it's reminds me of Fight Club at in the meeting where he's like, "Can I get that icon in cornflower blue?"
It'd be like that though. Good times.
Yeah, it really is. There are a lot of parallels in the two worlds, but they're also worlds apart.
Absolutely. But that's why I always looked at it, like I said at the very beginning, people, time, and money. In the end of the day, that's what you're managing. And no matter what your project you're on how you break it down. Or here, I'll say it in more corporate terms: cost, schedule, and performance. Right. That's really what you're responsible for as a PM. So, worlds apart, industries apart, doesn't matter. Those are still the three things you're tracking.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this as PMs. I said it in previous shows. Everything comes back to one of those three things, regardless of what you're talking about in your project. You're going to always run into those three things have to be in balance. Otherwise, your project isn't. And if you don't see it, then you're failing big time already, because if the three of them aren't in check,
Yep.
whatever's not in line, and you don't see where the downstream effects of that being out of line are, then you're missing the boat.
Absolutely. And go ahead, let one of those run wild, because it will drag the other two with it.
Yeah. And especially if you're talking about budget, you get to go in front of a lot of different people. And, we talked about having awkward conversations of saying, I don't know. Try telling someone you're out of money halfway through a project and don't know where it all went.
What do you mean? Like, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's at a stakeholder meeting. That's the last place you want to be saying, I don't know where my money and schedule went.
Yeah. You mean we weren't supposed to be having steaks catered for lunch?
Every day? What? You mean I'm not supposed to be making my guys work overtime on the weekends and holidays?
That are contractors?
That are contractors? Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you mean I can't just fire my whole crew because I don't like them?
Well, if they're contractors, you can.
No, contractors, yeah. But my whole crew, that would be good.
Yeah. So moving to some of your personal stories, which you've shared previously with me. I think that you had a good one about dealing with civilian PMs who had read in a leadership book.
Yep. The good old self-help leadership books out there were well, let me preface this with something real quick. You can't, if you're going to work for an organization like the Army, whether or not you have military experience, like at least understand the people you're working with. But, you do have some of these leaders who come out there and they're like, well, I read this in a leadership book and I said I should be doing this. It's like, no, that the leadership books are there to give you a framework and a basic understanding guideline, not almost like we talked about the PMBOK. It's not to be taken as law, and this is how it really works. Especially when you start treating your people bad. I just can't. That gets me going all day long.
Yeah, I have been asked time and time again about my leadership style, and I say I learned more from the terrible leaders than I did from the great ones, because when you've got those terrible leaders, you feel it when they put you in a bad spot. You feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, I'm never going to do this to somebody else when I'm in charge.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. They are the best leaders to learn from.
And the good ones, you take it for granted because it's easy. So you're just like, oh, I didn't realize how good it was until you change.
Yep. But actually, those good leaders actually help you identify the ones who are good leaders and the ones who are great leaders. And a lot of people, ask me how do you make that distinction? Because you could have two great leaders. Is like, for me, I always tell them, a good leader is going to teach you a lot of stuff you will take for granted, just like you said. But the great leaders not only run those things well, but they mentor you through the process and they explain to you why certain decisions were made. They may not tell you in that moment, but they're going to hit that point where like, okay, hey, we had to do it this way because this is what was happening. This is what I saw. And this is the information you gave me. And this is why we did that. So when they start mentoring you, that's a great leader.
Yeah. Sometimes you just sit in a project meeting and you start it with, I know this is going to suck, but this is happening anyways.
Yeah.
And then later on, after the fire's put out, you take them back and explain to them, all right, I know no one liked this, but this is why this had to be this way. And I just didn't have the time to walk you through everything because we had to get the job done.
Yep. And it's not a democracy. Sometimes you just have to do it. You have to go, and then we'll come back to it. We'll figure it out.
Yep. So now we're going to move into the guest question. And for the disgruntled PM, I don't ask every guest the same question. I kind of pick one out specifically for my guest.
All right. Love it.
So I try and tailor it a little bit to your personality.
Okay. I like the hot seat.
So if you had to choose one food to use as a weapon in a zombie apocalypse, what would it be and why?
Food as a weapon. So I'm fighting the zombies with that?
Yep.
Army biscuits. 100% army biscuits.
That came to you way too quick.
I've thought about this before. Many nights in a foxhole.
Yes.
I
forgot. I needed to get more creative with you because you've spent way too much time thinking about random things like I have.
Absolutely. But since I answered it so fast, why don't you do another one?
Okay. If you had to, your diet consisted of only foods that start with the first letter of your name, what would your diet look like and would you starve?
Yes, because the only thing I'm thinking of is juice right now. Let's see. Juice, jalapenos. Yeah, I'm already off to a bad start.
You got jambalaya.
Oh, jambalaya. There you go. Yep. See, that's why I keep you around. Jambalaya is good. I can survive off that.
I mean, it's got everything in it too. So, I mean, you're like getting a multiple there, force multiplier there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's got, well, you got your grains, you got your vegetables, you got your meats, your proteins. Yeah, I think we'll be all right. There's some liquid in there. I could put my jalapenos in there.
You can have Jolt.
Do they even still make Jolt?
I don't know.
Jolt was the best. Nothing like getting a 13-year-old hyped up on double the caffeine.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about it like I'll drink one at 5 o'clock and it won't affect me, but I'm immune to caffeine just like everyone in the military is because that's what we had to do. But starting at a 13-year-old giving her an energy drink every day, I was just like, wow, that's a lot.
I guess my only thing would be why? Like, what's?
Because all of her friends are doing it.
Okay, more of that cool thing to do,
I guess. And they're made to taste way better than they were when we were younger.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember I'll date myself when Red Bull was, just coming onto the scene. I remember the first time I had it, I was like, wow, this tastes like a peat on sweet tart. And now it's like, you got all these flavors. And in fact, right before the show, I drank an energy drink. I drank a Ghost and it was Welch's grape. And it tastes like Welch's grape juice.
Yeah. Those are something else in terms of the taste level. And I joke that, I can drink those. I can drink just about anything and I'll drink one at 5 and I'll go to bed at 10 and it won't bother me. My wife is the opposite, where if she has a Diet Pepsi at noon, she's wondering if she's going to fall asleep at night.
Oh no. But I think it's because we, at least in the military, we were flushed with it. I mean, when I was a drill sergeant, those big monsters with the twist lids?
Mm-hmm.
When I was a drill sergeant, 4 a day. And that's not counting the CQ nights. Like if I had CQ that night, you're at 5 or 6 just to make it through the night.
Yeah. I've had to cut mine radically back just to try and preserve my heart a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah.
So earlier you mentioned that you're the founder of Frago 22, and I know you've got some projects that you're working on. Why don't you tell the audience about kind of where they can find you and what they can find you doing?
So easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn mostly. I do have a Instagram and Facebook and all that, but LinkedIn's where my jam is. That's the best place to find me. My website frago22.com. But really, with all the stuff I'm doing, just keeping up with me on LinkedIn is the best. I love sharing ideas, but also all my big stuff that are kind of coming up right now. I'm about to start really promoting, really blasting out there. We have some exciting opportunities coming up just south of Fort Campbell. And with all goes well, we're going to have not one, but 2 different schools for veterans, for their spouses, for their kids coming up, along with the homestead community. Those who have talked to me on the side know about my homesteading communities for these veterans and tackling the housing crisis and the veteran homelessness. So follow me there and let's just talk. Let's engage.
And I'll have links in the show notes to all that stuff for you.
Sweet.
So, I think that John had a lot to give us today, and I would ask that you like and subscribe, engage with the show page, engage with the show. Let us know what you think. And I'll end it as I always do with mail your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM.